I'm sorry, I
Good.
will go. I'm sorry.
Okay, for
I blew your tape. I'm
our
sorry.
editing folks, let's wait till we start now. Uh, Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Open Mic Night for the Good Deeds Note Investing podcast. I am your co-host, Chris Seveny, here with the uh, very entertaining Gail Greenberg. Gail, how are you tonight?
Good. I preferred all knowing though. That felt rather fabulous. But yeah, I'll take whatever you're dishing out.
I try and change it up every time. So,
Yeah.
but first of all, thank you all for joining us tonight. And like every week we do this, we like to try and keep this open for everybody to ask questions on anything related to notes or real estate in general. Answer questions, hot topics you may have, or things you've heard, things you've seen in the industry. We just kind of like to keep it open, so feel free to ask questions in the chat box or in the Q&A, and if you have any, fill them in. But in the meantime, as those start rolling in, Gail, do you have anything on the what just happened to you recently?
Well, we recorded a podcast yesterday that was about how I took possession of a house in my IRA, and because I want to own this house and use it in the future, which I can't do if it's in my IRA, that I was describing the process that you have to go through to take something you own in your IRA and transfer it to yourself. And I was upset afterwards because I realized there were a couple of really important things that we forgot to talk about. So I would love
Mhm.
to just opine on them now, if that's,
Okay, go
yeah.
ahead.
So the crux of the story, which I encourage you all to listen to at length because Chris made some very good interjections in my story. But the issue was that I owned a contract for deed in my IRA, and the house itself was in very poor condition. The borrower was 14 months behind when I bought the CFD, and she had not made a payment in 5 months. So this is not unusual behavior for a CFD borrower that is delinquent when you buy it. But the issue for me that I kind of quickly found out once I owned it and a friend went over to talk to her for me, the house was in really, really terrible shape. It was very hazardous condition. One of the markers, the tip-offs to that was it's a side-by-side double, and she had an electrical extension cord running from one door to the other or one window to the other. Like clearly one side was being powered by the other side. And it was a very old rickety wooden house. So that seemed particularly horrendous to me. And I started to be really, really scared that not just the borrower was in danger, but since she was a young woman, she might also have children living there who would also be in danger. And I lost a lot of sleep worrying that there could be a fire, particularly because of this extension cord situation. And so I did get the house back recently. It took a long time, and it was very challenging. But I realized in the aftermath, like one of the big thing that I was worried about, other than the borrower and her family being killed in a fire, is that because it was owned by my IRA, that you always hear about IRAs being sort of untouchable in lawsuits. Like very famously, O.J. Simpson was, after he was criminally acquitted, he was civilly sued by the families of his murdered ex-wife and the young man who came over accidentally. And they won a giant civil judgment against him. And the only assets he had were in his IRA. And I was really shocked. I don't know if you remember this. You were such a little tyke when that happened.
I was in college.
Okay.
Well, when the Bronco chase, I was in college.
Yeah.
But the other half
Um,
was,
but I didn't know much about finances and IRAs, but I was really impressed by the fact that they couldn't get any money from his IRA, even though he apparently had quite a lot of it. So, I've always thought, hey, if something's an IRA, nobody can touch it. But that's actually not true. That's true of independent judgments that are not related to the activities of your IRA. Like you can kill someone and not have to pay them anything. But if your IRA is involved in an activity and, there's a lawsuit related to that, like here, my IRA owned this house. If there was a house-related liability issue where someone had really been hurt in that house, absolutely my IRA could be sued and I could have lost the whole thing. And then the people who want it would have to deal with all my CFDs that are in my IRA. So
yeah, if you have, yeah, and that's a very good point, because if you have bought with retirement funds an asset and the borrower thinks that you may not own it or just sues you because they want to sue you or whatever the case may be, what's in there is, they can go after what's in there. That's not protected.
right.
Now, what's interesting is if you run out of money defending it, I asked this question once, is can you put more money in it to basically defend yourself and stuff? And I was told you can.
Really? So more than your normal contribution amount that you'd be allowed to do?
Yeah, it's almost like taking a loan off of it. But again, that you would definitely need an IRA custodian attorney to explain all that to you.
Yeah. Our blanket disclaimer, we are people who know a little about a lot of things, but
that's just word of caution. Yeah, that's just, another word of caution. People with their IRAs who are investing in non-performing, just be careful, because it can be at risk, so.
Yeah, so had I not at this juncture gotten possession of this and a canceled land contract from the borrower, what I would have done that I probably should have done all along was put it in a trust. And you can basically put it in a trust where your IRA is the beneficiary of the trust. So you don't have to remove it from your IRA. You just have to kind of more obscure the relationship between your IRA and the asset. So that's definitely something to look into if you have a situation like this where you're really concerned. So,
okay.
I'm glad I got that out.
So, for mine, I want to share this story with people because I think it's relevant to people who have joined us today too. I got a call out of the blue today from an investor who I don't know who this person is, and they had gotten into a deal where they were in a JV that they funded like 5 contract for deeds back in 2016, 2017. And the LLC that they funded it with were these 2 individuals, and they basically split up and they're not together anymore. And the CFDs are non-performing, and it's a pretty hairy situation. But the sponsor, the individual who was the one who originally bought them and took these people under his wing to JV with, basically says, well, okay, I'm just going to deed these back to you and you can have them. So the person was asking me kind of, for some opinions and information on, is that okay or whatnot and so forth and so on. And
okay, so I'm a little lost already. So what was going, so there was an LLC.
So, yep. So there was a company, there was, just like you have a company. So say I was JVing with you and you bought 5 notes with my funds as part of our JV deal. And, your entity is owned by you and your sister, and you and your sister split up. But the LLC is still valid. What's happened?
And the things were bought in that LLC, right?
Yeah.
titled in the LLC.
But
And there's a JV agreement with the funder person.
Yeah. And the assets are clearly not worth what, what the investor put in, has contributed to them. And because they've, these two people who own this company basically have split up, they're like, okay, we're just going to deed them back to you. And the person was like, okay. And, should I do that? And I said, well, let me see your JV agreement first. And I was looking at it, and
so I'm sorry to keep stopping you, but the person who's getting them back is the funder, right?
Yeah, he's the funder.
Yeah. So does he know anything about any of this? He was just counting on the JV.
Yeah, I mean,
wow.
So he's like, so he's been calling like Madison and calling Franco and stuff because they're in Ohio and they're contract for deeds, and of course they're more than 5 years old, and in most JV agreements, there's always that terminology that says after a certain period of time, you can request your money back at a preferred interest rate. And first question I said is, well, did you do that? And he's like, well, no. So of course I, sicked him onto Brian, Brian Gail, attorney, who I use.
The enforcer.
Yeah, the enforcer, who's a very whiz-bang attorney if anyone needs a referral. But, it's interesting because, the person's like, what do I do and stuff? And, and I said, well, first get an attorney involved because, you just don't want to take them back and then lose all your rights to the money that you can potentially lose because it's, a lot of money that will be out on these deals. And what's unfortunate, I think, is this individual partnered with somebody who I don't believe he did enough due diligence on who he was partnering with. And it was people who were inexperienced. Their LLC hadn't been around for a while. Didn't ask them how many notes or get any references from them. So,
from other happy JVs.
Yep. So he kind of put himself a little bit in a bad situation. I just want to say that to people who are listening because there's a lot of people on Facebook or, Bigger Pockets and these websites who claim that they, flip 120 houses a year, or I love the pictures of somebody with the beautiful woman up against a Ferrari, or like a picture of a Ferrari. Should I buy this and stuff? And it's like, oh, come on. But the reality of it is, there's a lot of people out there who overstate sometimes their experience or what they can do. And I just, warn everyone, just be cautious and make sure you do proper due diligence whenever you're dealing with people, and make sure it's somebody who has a track record. And, people can give you a flyer that says, hey, I've done all these deals. I mean, I can have someone on Fiverr for $25, make 50 of them that, and tell them to create whatever he wants on them, and they could look great, and you'll never know the difference, or most people won't. But, the key is to get references. That's what, I always would say is get references and ask other note investors around. If somebody wants to question me, give Gail or Scott or somebody else, or somebody JV with, give them a call and say, hey, what do you know about this guy?
Yeah, I would say, anyone you're going to potentially partner with should be happy to give you the names of people, including, they should be willing to call their current JVs and say, would you speak to this person about your general level of satisfaction. So I have a couple of questions for you.
Yep.
First of all, you don't have to, obviously you're not going to name who this was, but is this somebody we would all know if you did?
No, I've never heard.
Not in the usual groups. Okay.
No. And so the individual who gave the money, never heard of. The individuals who took the money or were the investors in the deal, never heard of them. I mean, never heard of them.
Huh. Yeah, and I guess you don't know the details, but how did they end up? How did these things end up being worth so much less than this person put in?
They overpaid.
What's that?
They were paying.
They overpaid.
$25,000 for Ohio CFDs that had,
swimming pools and
that had $5,000 to $7,000 in taxes on them as well.
Oh, gosh.
So,
wow.
Typically an Ohio CFD, a lot of times you're probably in the 5 to 15 range. If you're paying 25,000, you better hope that property's got a UPB of 50 to 60 in Ohio because of foreclosure costs and stuff.
Yeah, so now you've said the magic word taxes. Right before we got on, I was going through all my CFDs that are not escrowed and checking to see who has not paid their taxes. And surprisingly, it's a lot of people. And I know you lecture me about not having escrow, but at FCI, no, FCI, like the big fatal decision was using FCI because I never knew this till I was sort of in too deep with them, that they will not escrow an account unless it's current. So that means like everybody pretty much cannot be escrowed. Like if it is escrowed, if it's already been escrowed at the former servicer, they will kind of grandfather that, but only for a short period of time. So if you don't get people like paying like clockwork really fast, they close the escrow, and then you're doing what I'm doing, looking to see.
So the opposite of that is I have a property that had an outstanding tax balance that I agreed to advance the funds for the taxes because I'm working out something with the borrower. And, you know, the opposite of that is I just sent Madison a quick email saying, can you please advance the taxes to the tax collector and add it to the balance on the account for the borrower? And lo and behold, that day, boom, they sent that check out, took an ACH out of my bank, and boom.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to do a thing, just 20 words.
Yes. Just give them the green light.
Yeah.
Right. So now Brian Gallagher is in Maryland.
Yes. Yeah, he's in Maryland, but he handles a lot of business transactional.
Yeah, he does like general counsel type stuff for really any state. If you were doing a foreclosure, he would not be able to do that for you.
Yeah.
Outside of, where does he practice other than Maryland? Is this just Maryland?
Yeah. So
well, Maryland's a good state because there's a lot of things you need a lawyer for in
yes.
Maryland.
So, and we just have someone said they have terrible service from Madison. What I would say is you need to stay on top of your people there. You know, also, you know, I have close to 70 loans boarded with them, so I like to stay on them for things. So when
you get the preferred,
yeah,
you're in the VIP lounge.
They're pulling $5,000-6,000 out of my account every month. I better get some decent service because I could hire somebody full time probably for 2/3 of the price.
Right. So David, I would just say all servicers are terrible on some level. They all need to be watched. They're like unruly children. They have to be not unruly children. They're more like teenagers who won't do anything unless you yell at them. So
yeah. Servicing is, you know, one of the things, and I mentioned this on a prior podcast, and I will hammer this into everyone is, you know, when you get your loans transferred from one servicer to the next, ask for that transfer file to make sure they carried all those costs over, because I can tell you there's a lot of times they don't. And, you know, there's some past balances that the prior lender may have paid in taxes or insurance that are above and beyond the UPB, but added to the total payoff that you want to make sure those get incorporated. I had an asset in Florida that had an unpaid balance of $24,000, but $20,000 in other payments from HOA fees and taxes that initially it didn't get transferred over. And then when they sent the attorney the payoff for the foreclosure, I was like, you know, calling time out. I'm like, the payoff is like 40-something thousand, not 24,000. And I literally got on a conference call and took about an hour and a half to explain it to them, but they finally got it.
Yeah, so I'm going to read from the chat box for the benefit of people who will be watching this later. And David just said, yeah, I have to keep sending emails to Madison and they never return them or return calls. Mm-hmm. So and I've heard that actually. So borrowers have told me that about FCI, that that's really upsetting when someone's trying to pay something and the servicer doesn't call them back. Like that really gets me. But do you have any tips on how to get a call back from Madison, Chris?
I don't call them too often. Typically, what I find is I'll either email early in the morning or the evening, and then I always do kind of the 3 email rule. I'll email say email them on Monday, then I'll follow up on Wednesday, and if I don't hear anything on Thursday, either Thursday evening or Friday, it's like the big bold email, like please respond.
Yeah.
I just get obnoxious at times, but
yeah. I'm a big fan of the all caps subject line. I find that tends to get seen.
Okay. Any other questions that anyone has out there at this point in time?
Yes. Is anyone doing a deal? Is anyone doing their first deal or one of their first 5 deals? Crickets.
I hear my wife just go to our daughter, seriously? So that means my daughter didn't get all her homework done, and that she probably had to do. So let me ask this question, and I apologize if everyone's got 10 broken fingers and can't type. But
you're turning the tables, now you're going to ask them questions?
I'm going to ask them another question as well, has anyone never seen a tape or have experience looking at tapes?
Did everyone receive the direct source tape that came out a couple hours ago?
That's what I was going to get at.
494 assets on it.
Yes. Average UPB, 50,000. Because what I was going to do is, if people wanted to, I was going to pop that up on the screen real quick and just walk through what's on the tape for people. So,
I just was going to say only 34% of those on that new tape are owner occupied.
Yeah, and if you look at, and I'll mention this to people,
that's a new low.
That's a low, but also look at the last pay date, because I had somebody I know email me and said, hey, can you take a look at this asset? I'm thinking of bidding on it. And the loan matured in 2014, and the last payment was in 2011, I believe. And my comment back is, pick up the phone and just call an attorney real quick and just ask, because I believe the statute of limitations in Pennsylvania is 6 years. And I believe these assets were from Granite. Then they were bought by Granite's no longer around. So American Home Opportunity, or AHP, Jorge Newberry, bought them. And I think he's using John to sell them. And in the past, I've had issues with some of those assets, because these are usually very hairy assets, and statute of limitations issues where, you got to be very careful to make sure you can get the, that it's an enforceable lien, like I like to put in my agreements. I think Gail.
Yeah. If they make just one payment, then the statute of limitations resets, right?
Yep.
Hello?
Yep.
Can you hear me, Chris?
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. If they make even just, I got a sign that my internet connection is unstable, like everyone else in this home. So one, and the statute of limitations resets, right, for the whole.
You're unstable, Gail.
Oh, no.
Okay. Oh, you're back.
I'll write cards. I will write things.
But yeah, so that's one thing. And yeah, I can pull it up in a minute and see if I can get on screen, just answer a few of these other questions for people. One, Jordan said, how did you vet your accountants? Tax season is scary. And yeah, okay. And he mentioned he received the tape. So accountants, so there's 2 things that I'll mention. One is there's your accountant, and I have a bookkeeper. And actually the bookkeeper I find almost be more important than the accountant, because the bookkeeper is the one that actually does all your books for you and, make sure keeps everything honest. And then the accountant from that side is basically takes the P&L report that my bookkeeper does and sticks that into my taxes every year. So I've been using the same accountant for several years, because my wife has the most complex taxes that you can imagine, because she works for a tax exempt foreign world entity that she gets a paycheck but ends up having to basically pay her own taxes in a way, or she gets a stipend. It's really crazy. So we have to use somebody that knows specifically how to deal with that. You're going to say something, Gail?
I don't know if you can hear me. Am I back?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. It's so weird. Talk about, yeah. So I said that if they make one payment, the statute of limitation resets. And then Sylvia said, what is the statute of limitations in most states? 5 years? It's very variable.
It's 4, 5, 6, 10.
Yeah, it's all over the place. 7, yeah, for sure.
And here's the other thing that's interesting is in some states, and people are going to be like looking at me with 6 heads, you may not be able to collect the debt, but the property is still secured by the mortgage. So it's similar to like a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. In a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, they wipe out their debt. So they're no longer responsible for paying you the mortgage and the note on that property. But you still have rights to, foreclose on that property because of the mortgage. And it can be like that as well. But typically in a lot of these older ones, it gets tied up and caught in legal. And because what they may do is go hire an attorney, say, I paid this off, and then you're chasing down pay histories from banks from 2010 and 12 that aren't around, or it might be Ocwen or some of these other banks who are lenders who didn't keep good records. And then it's, for me, I learned my lesson the hard way on buying some of that stuff. If they don't have, if it's occupied and they don't have payments in the last, call it 24, 36 months or something, and it's been 5, 6 years, I'm not, it doesn't pass.
Going there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as far as the statute of limitations, if it's the statute of limitations is, if you're past that, you can actually sometimes forgive, like if the statute of limitations is 5 years and now it is 5 years, or it's 6 years, you can sometimes forgive like that, first year way back when, and like bring them within the statute of limitations period. Does that make sense? I don't know if that, any sense, or if you even heard me.
Yeah, say the loan matures in 2025 and they haven't paid since 2012, and it's a 5-year statute of limitations. They owe you 7 years of payments instead of 7 years of payments from 2012. You make it 4 years of payments and run it back to 2015. So from 2012 to 2015, you basically wipe those clean, and then only looking to collect the past due within that statute.
Right. So the point is, not all is lost, but definitely consult an attorney when you have a borderline situation, or something where you could. I mean, sometimes you buy something, the statute of limitations isn't up, but it might be up during that period of time where you're trying to get them to make a payment.
And the other thing I found too is if you tried to buy an asset with your IRA and the loan has matured, they won't let you buy it.
Really?
Yeah,
Who's the they in this, your custodian?
I've had this issue once with somebody with Quest and an equity, where I've had loans that have matured, and we're working on new modifications, but they're basically like getting ready to fine me or fine the person because the loans have matured and so forth. And when I was talking to them once, they made a comment that, you can't, typically they won't allow you to buy a loan that's already matured because of, you're not buying a loan, it's matured. It's, what are you buying? So, So Sylvia asked, I don't buy notes that have not made a payment within the last 3 years. Correct. Unless it was a vacant property that I was looking to take that property, which happens, every blue moon, typically. But if there's somebody living in that property and they haven't paid in 3 years, 3, 4 years, something's up. And they've been able to fight the system for the last 3, 4 years. probably a good chance that they're going to continue to figure out a way to finagle the system.
Yes, they're wily foxes. You're just a regular person, so.
Okay. Yeah. You want me to pop it up real quick, Gail, and just we can walk through kind of some of the stuff?
The tape, yes. I don't know if everyone gets these tapes. If not, you should definitely sign up for them.
Okay, so let me
They're enormous. They are a true test of your ability to separate the good from the bad.
Okay, let me figure out how to share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Okay. So I literally haven't had a chance to look at this, so I don't know what is on it. But yeah, I saw the cover page. The offering had, 494 assets, $25 million UPB, 80% loan to value, 34% owner occupied. I just put a quick formula. 51,000 is the average UPB, and bids are due Tuesday. So this looks like it's a highest bid situation, not first come, first serve.
Mm-hmm.
So
interesting. I'm scanning to see if I recognize these.
Yeah, there's some assets I saw because there's one next to the town I grew up in that was a granite asset like 6 months ago. So these assets have been around a while. And typically, when you run through these, of course, you're going to have the city, state, address, and zip code. And just one through here. The original amount for people, that's the original amount of the original loan. UPB is the unpaid principal balance. That's one of the two kickers for what your bid should be off of, the lower of that or the fair market value of BPO value. You see the interest rate, the original term. One thing to note when they say remaining term, that is a remaining term on the original loan. If they're 3 years behind, it says 19 months. That's not meaning there's only 19 payments left. That's how many months were remaining on that original loan if they would have been paying from the beginning of time. So that's why you see this one's negative 19 months. There's another one, negative 28. So these have been, these loans have matured over a year ago. So like this one right here, over 5 years ago, this loan matured, and it's still owner occupied. That would scare the living hell out of me.
Your IRA won't let you buy it anyways.
Yeah, so
probably a good thing.
Let's see. Okay, loan type, conventional, other. Sometimes be careful when you look at loan types too, because sometimes it could be like a HELOC or an equity line. And one time I didn't realize once I got the collateral and it was an equity line. I'm like, oh, I'm not dealing with this.
Yeah, I don't know anything about how to deal with an equity line.
It's a second. So, it's, but if they don't make the payments, it's because the problem is they could become, whole again, and then they could start pulling money back out of it, and then you have to keep giving them money. So you have to have the cash too. Property types, SFR, single family residential, manufactured townhouse condos. When you're dealing with condos and townhouses, make sure to check HOAs. Are people familiar with, super lien states with HOAs? Actually, on Madison's website, they have the 13 states where an HOA lien supersedes a first position lien. So it's on their website under investor information. It's actually pretty handy.
I have a question for you, Chris. In a I know in some states the HOA, it's capped how much that they can actually go after you for.
Yep.
Those tend probably, I'm guessing, not to be the super lien states, because the super lien states they seem to have the greatest rights, the greatest amount of rights.
I think Florida is a priority lien or super lien or whatever you call it, but it's capped. So it still, I think, falls under that calculation, but it can be capped. So that's one thing. Just again, always have your attorney know. See, I thought something popped up in the chat, but I guess not.
Yeah, now Sylvia said it's called safe harbor.
Yep.
When they're capped, right, Sylvia?
Yep. PMT, that's your principal payment. So that's how much their principal and interest payment is per month. Total payment would be the escrow, so you can see if they were taking escrow or not. I think that calculated LTV is actually I put in. BPO value, so that's their BPO value. Seriously, take it with a grain of salt. And the reason why is
let's all just enjoy a group laugh right now at that
because
color.
I know. So I grew up. Let's see, right next to this asset here, on row 34 in Palmer, Mass. I lived in the next town over, and UPB is 216, and this had a BPO of like 150 at one time. Let me see. Oh, 255 is their BPO value. I can tell you right now, this house is vacant, it's trashed out, and will not sell for more than $65,000. So just give you an idea of take it with a grain of salt. What you'll typically notice is the BPO value is usually very close to the UPB or the total payoff. Imaginary. It's kind of like when you go to buy a house, and the appraiser comes by and it magically, appraises for what your value is. And that's why I also knew these were granite, because if anyone's ever, seen granite assets in the past, their BPOs are, I don't know who does them. I was looking at an asset once that they had it listed as a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, single family house. And it was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath townhouse that the townhouses in the area in this neighborhood were selling for between 50 to 70 updated. And they had one other REO that sold for like 29. They had a BPO of 105. So
a little clue why granite's not around it.
Yeah, and I didn't know if it was Uzbek Sums or what currency they meant, but it had the dollar signs. But I think it was some other currency that exchanged about a 4-to-1 rate. So
I'm seeing a lot of very old last payment received dates here.
Yeah, so I'm just actually gonna sort this oldest. Last payment received 2008, 2010, 2011, 13. You can start to see, there's how many on this asset on this tape. 28 assets that haven't made a payment in over 4 years. That's a lot. So these.
Yeah, those are probably not going to reperform, though. I do have a friend who bought one where there hadn't been a payment, or there'd only been like one payment in 10 years. And she got them to reperform. Yeah. I have to ask her whether they kept reperforming.
The question I would ask Gail is, if you had a house that hasn't paid, let's take one of these from 2008 that is vacant, do you really think that house is still worth $108,000 that's been sitting vacant for most likely 10 years?
Yeah, I never really thought about the fact that houses are almost like organic living beings, in the sense that when they're not cared for at all, they really fall apart, like surprisingly fast, even beyond the normal pipes freezing that we all worry about. Like, there's just so many bad effects. It is really, really scary.
I work, as people know, full-time in construction development, and I can tell you, between humidity and cold, what humidity and that can do to I'll say wood and drywall and things that are organic is pretty amazing. A house can go to crap pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's right. You told me if I was going to go spend my winters in some warm, sunny clime, that I should set my thermostat at 60? Was that the lowest you would go?
Yep.
You said?
Mm-hmm. So, some of these other things. These are some new things I've never seen. Days past due. I mean, what's the most? Let's just see what the most is out of curiosity. Okay.
11,000. That's a lot of days.
Okay, but oh wait, it gets better. Don't know if it's occupied, but it's still worth $480,000. I hope it's in California. Okay. Okay, it is in California. Okay, so I mean, you can, probably justify that maybe. So, one thing to check, the escrow balance. So again, this is some of these things like the escrow balances. Some of these things that are what doesn't transfer sometimes to your servicer that you want to make. But one thing also to check is when you sort this, the escrow balance. Actually, let me do the smallest. I'll do negative. They have spent $36,000. Okay, this one in 5 years has spent $15,000. So they have spent some considerable money between taxes and probably legal fees and everything. Oh, no, there's a legal fee column. Okay, so this is probably taxes and maybe insurance. Legal fee balance is something I like to look at because, okay, this person's made 38, but they still dropped $6,500 in legal, and hopefully it's Ohio.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Shows you how hard the people fight.
Okay, it's Connecticut. Okay, just as bad. PA, Ohio. Yeah, you can see. Judicial versus non-judicial here.
I once had Condor tell me about a property in Philadelphia that they foreclosed on. Mm-hmm. The broker at Condor actually said to me, like, you would not believe how much it costs to foreclose on this guy. He goes, they spent like $100,000. And he goes, but all you're going to have to do is evict him. And in Philadelphia, there's a very difficult, if someone knows the rules and how to game the system, like an eviction in Philadelphia can cost $50,000. So when he told me they fight that hard, it's like, okay, no.
Here's why, like Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey. Okay, so in Connecticut, Virginia's in here. I want to check this one too. But when I scroll back over, there's a column here called Other Fee Balance. I'm hoping this isn't other fees that they've accumulated because they've put $200,000 into this. I mean, $50,000. I'm not sure what this other fee balance. Maybe this is.
It's possible that was transferred from the previous owner of this.
Yeah. Or like, I can't see. Is.
I can't see putting that kind of money into it. So while we're musing about this, Sylvia wants to know if Direct Source will let us put the redeemable clause in the contract since they're brokering. And do we have the clause available? Well, Sylvia, it's not John Keith who runs Direct Source who decides whether you can put that clause in the contract or not. It's going to be the seller. And when the seller is feeling highly motivated, they not only put the redeemable clause in, they'll give you an entire side letter where they'll pay off all kinds of things as long as you'll buy the thing. Sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. You just have to ask.
I did post a language on the Good Deeds Note Investing podcast Facebook page. So there's a Facebook page for the podcast that I did post earlier today. A Google document of what the language was prior to what I've seen and what is after. Now, the other thing too is, these are actually mortgage notes. So that's something like Gail said you have to deal with. A lot of times Direct Source sells contract for deeds, which you don't really need that language because you're getting a deed, but notes, it's something that, especially on some of these that have really old dates, it's something I would push for to have. Okay.
Right. And Casey wants to know, what about the Colorado is negative? Did you just say something was negative about the Colorado?
I didn't say anything negative. I don't know anything about Colorado, except I know it's got a lot of mountains.
Rocky Mountain High.
And they're rocky too. But no, I haven't ever looked. Honestly, I rarely look west of the Mississippi. I've done a little bit in Oklahoma.
Wyoming.
Yeah, Wyoming. Yeah, I'm closing on the 28th, Gail. Closing on the 28th. typically like up in the greater Pacific Northwest, I hear it's trouble up there. California typically is, don't see much. There's a lot on this tape in Texas, which it was surprising to see, but those typically go for so much. I probably won't even touch them because I don't have a base there. So Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, Nebraska, a lot of those states, as you from Nebraska and start moving west, I typically shy away from those. And the reason why too is there's 500 assets on this tape. I like to look at, there's some in Virginia, there's some in Michigan or North Carolina, Florida. I bet you just the states I invest in, I'll probably pull 150 assets, and I'll probably toss Ohio off this list because of, I'm just, I don't know, I've got a love-hate relationship
with Ohio. Yeah, now Casey said there's a Colorado asset where the UPB was negative. Can you go back?
Negative UPB? What are you going to pay for that, Gail? No, UPB 14,000. Okay. Now let's see what was negative on there. There's probably something negative. Yeah, okay. I don't see anything negative on there. Okay. Let's see. Oh, we got foreclosure sale dates, delinquent interest principal. I'm not sure what this delinquent interest and principal is because it doesn't line up with like the total payoff versus UPB. So ILS is usually a legal payoff on the asset, which some sellers will try and convince you that's what you should be buying off of. But what I always tell them is if you put that number in the contract and guarantee that number is the true and enforceable number on it, sure, I'll bid off of it. But you'll never get anyone to agree to that because, then they're admitting that every legal fee and everything they paid, they have to basically itemize and prove that if you ever were to fight it. And, everyone likes to say,
you got the receipts.
Yeah. They'll all say, hey, it's great. This is where I want to pay off of, but they'll never be able to prove it to you, if you wanted it to.
And lots of times the house is never going to go for that anyway or anything close to it. So it's not like you can really get it.
Yeah, here's that other one of corporate advanced balances. Sometimes this is also, sometimes taxes go here versus escrow maybe, but I mean, you've got these companies, they dump $67,000 into this lien, which has, it's a vacant property in New York. And notice at the top what all these are again: New York, New Jersey. So when people say, oh, New York, New Jersey, it takes a long time to foreclose, but it's great and stuff. Look at what these people were putting out of their pocket. Legal fees, other fees, and then, what was it? And it's in chapter 13, even better. Corporate advances. I mean, you're putting
a lot of money.
That's a hell of a lot of money.
Yes, I remember a friend of ours from Scott Carson's mastermind who bought a very pretty little house in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And didn't realize how high the taxes were. So while he was waiting for this long process to take place, he was paying and paying and paying.
Like $8,000 a year, and you're at $5,000 to foreclose. There's $40,000.
Yeah.
And the reality of it is, you're not really getting that money back. I mean, it's
not all of it, sure.
So, Gail, when you get this, what's the first thing you're going to do? How are you going to? You got 500 assets, or what are you going to do?
Well, I wish I had your fabulous new toxic asset identifier. Did you want to introduce that at all to these?
Yeah, I can. Let me find it.
So I assume everyone on this webinar is aware that on the Notes and Bolts Facebook page, we have a crowdsourced toxic asset tape that we hope all of you will continue to add to as you find more and more toxic assets. This was born of frustration when we found, that we had all bought title reports on assets that other people had already rejected. And had we only known, that there were major problems or major liens or whatever, we never would have, spent the money on the title report. This reminds me of when I took back a toy that was totally not non-functioning after Christmas. And I explained in great detail to the person at the desk that why I was like bringing it back and how it didn't work at all. And I actually watched that person like put it in a bin for someone to restock onto the shelf. And I thought, okay, but it's worse here because you have to spend $150 on the title report. So if you haven't signed up to see the toxic assets, this is exactly the kind of tape you want to know ahead of time which ones to avoid.
I'm going to show it on a tape of one that
last month's tape.
Yeah. So
these are different. I don't think we have much knowledge about these guys, but Direct Source, who put out this tape, puts out big tapes from a company called Window Rock that trades under names like Camelback, Home Opportunity, Flatiron Holdings. They have like 10 different names altogether. And Siphon Draw is another one. So
I'm having some technical difficulties.
Yeah, so those are also huge tapes. They're all contracts for deed, generally speaking. I think we accidentally bought one that isn't a contract for deed in Bamberg, South Carolina. And well, every once in a while they just throw in a note to mess you up. But these are enormous tapes, and some of the assets, like if you've been looking at tapes for 6 months or more, you will already have seen the same assets over and over again on these tapes. They just keep circling the drain. And they just keep hoping someone new will come along who doesn't realize that they are toxic assets.
I can't find all mine have been edited down to just the ones I put on.
Okay.
So
I'll send you one.
Yeah, you want to send me one right now?
Yeah.
And while we wait for that, any other questions? So what this, and Gail, I was trying to open it up and stuff, and I think you mentioned basically about the toxic assets. So it's a nifty little thing. I just, again, had somebody create that highlights all these toxic assets. Right now, most of the assets are CFDs, because that's what a lot have been looking at, but people start adding notes or others to the categories, then definitely keep adding to it. But if people, let me just pop open the toxic asset. So here's the list right now. We've got about 40 or so assets on here, close to 40, and explaining what the items and issues are. We also ask people if they have the O&E just to add it as a link or a attorney review, just so someone else can just take a look at it. What we try and do also is limit it to more of it being toxic and somebody's, not somebody's full-blown opinion on something, if that makes sense. Like, ones are transferred to land bank or, so forth. But somebody put once like, okay, here's one that says like, agent says nearby paper mill emits constant stench. Well, okay, technically that's toxic, but
that's super toxic.
Yeah, that's not something that is, kills the fact of you can't, it doesn't have $30,000 in sewer liens or something like that. It's just
well, I'm going to disagree with you there, Chris.
Okay.
Anything that's going to make it really difficult to make a profit from, is I think that's a legitimate thing to flag in our little community. I certainly appreciate when people.
Yeah, no, I think about it. If I found that out later on and stuff, yeah, I'd probably be like, oh, God damn it.
Yeah. How about places where people have been murdered? Like, that's a relevant piece of
Yeah, we have
information.
to add that one.
We actually, unfortunately, have those.
Yeah, we have to add that one that Dan had also, I think, posted as well. So, actually, here's a little trick. I didn't realize this. If you hit Control A twice on Excel, it selects everything. So you don't have to like drag everything across like 47 columns and down 400 rows. If you just hit Control A twice, it selects everything.
Well, if you just hit the upper corner, the upper left corner, that selects everything too.
Yeah, that selects everything too, but
But what?
okay. Okay, so I paste everything in here. Then I got a little menu tab. Then I will update reference, which is updating. It takes that Google sheet. So if I added 5 minutes ago.
Okay, Chris, we're not seeing anything. We're just like, okay.
Oh, you're not?
Wait a minute. All right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, you can see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Okay. So that update reference pulls everything into this reference tab, which pulls everything to Google Doc. And then if I click this validate button, it highlights all the toxic assets. So it basically pulls everything. So we got 1,309, the one in Birmingham, one in Decatur.
All I'm seeing is the tape we were looking at before. So you've switched?
I have. Hold on. That would probably
Maybe
help.
it's me. Is it me?
No, it's probably me. Hold on. Now?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yep. Okay.
So,
can you do it again so we can see the magic of it happening?
Yes, I can, because I have a nifty little clear sheet.
Oh, awesome.
Clears everything. So, let's see. Is this the one? No, that's so Gail just sent this to me. So I'm gonna.
Okay, now we're back on the original. Okay, now we're in the.
So I copy that and then I just paste it in here. Puts everything in, and then under my menu, I update the reference, which pulls everything from Google. So a week from now, if somebody added 10 assets in the meantime and we got a tape, it would pull all those. So it's always pulling the most up to date.
Okay, everyone who's trying to follow what Chris is doing, just we will write real instructions. Just sit back and relax.
Yeah, no, we'll do it.
Don't try to.
So, and then when I click that validate, what it does is it takes everything from the Google Doc toxic list and then highlights it on that spreadsheet. So now, if you see my screen,
how many are there? I see. Row 13 is.
Yep. So what I can do here is.
Well, row 13 is always a bad one.
So I can filter by color, and then when I click the color, they're the ones.
Okay, it hasn't on my screen done anything. Woo! There they are. Okay, so that's not so many. Let me see. Oh my God, that Liberty Valley one, the second one, I almost bought that one.
So
let's see. I think I put it on the toxic asset list.
I've had this one under agreement. I think I looked at that one, but then I realized.
Yeah, I've had Garth Avenue, the bottom two. I've had those under agreement.
Okay, so Jordan made the thing I only see. Yeah, I apologize for that. I'm my screen now. Okay, so Sylvia asked a question that she sees one in Hawaii. You used to live there. Sylvia, where do you live now, and why did you leave Hawaii? That's really the question I have.
If she says Michigan, I will scream.
Then she said the issues with condos being on ground rent that may have been expired are going to expire. So I've never seen assets really in Hawaii, so I'd love to have them, but that's a good thing. But I do know, for example, so I'm in the Washington D.C. area, and in Arlington, Virginia, literally right at the foot of the bridge to get into D.C., there's a condo complex that has that same thing. They have a ground lease that expires in like 2027. So people now can't sell their condos there. So people are Airbnb and renting them. And because the owner of the property is going to want to redevelop it. So what's also happening is they are also, not taking care of the building. So it's pretty interesting stuff like that. Okay, she lives in Virginia, my neck of the woods. So.
Yeah.
But long story. Well, at least you're in Virginia, so great state. So as long as you're not following the politics in the state right now, but got a little bit of problems. But we won't go there. Any other questions? Let's see. Q&A from people. Feel free to delete 3 assets in Illinois. 2 in Crook County and Rockford isn't too hot either. So yes, Illinois. So I'm just going to pop back that other tape. And open it here. So first thing, that I'll do is when I look at this is I sort it by state, and then, Alabama, I'm not buying notes in Alabama because I don't want to wait a year to redeem. Arkansas, I'm never invested in. Arizona, never invested in. California, no thank you. Colorado, no. Connecticut, no. Stay away from Connecticut. Delaware, well, Wilmington is not the best place. Florida, I'd probably look at. Georgia, I may look at. Iowa, probably not.
Did you see that Lavanda Lane in Cantonment, Florida, or whatever it was? This is a mixtape.
Yeah.
I've seen that one a million. I've bid on that one.
Mm-hmm.
This one in St. Petersburg, row 45.
Yep.
That one, 2300, 2500 33rd Street, that has a $20,000 municipal lien on it. That's in our toxic asset list.
It is?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So we could use it for this.
Yeah, and there's Liberty Valley, the 53. We just saw that highlighted in red. 53. That has terminal title. That needs a quiet title. That would cost upwards of $6,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem there, because they won't. I mean, if they would sell it at a price where it made sense to spend that kind of money, it looks like a nice house.
So let me do this real quick.
The issue is sellers. Maybe I'll do like a lowball offer on that one, since they know it has problems, and we know it has problems.
Let me see here what happens when we. So we got one in Birmingham. And I think I grabbed the wrong one. So
yeah, it's the same one again.
Yeah. So, must not copied. Let me try it one more time here. Doggy's barking. Okay, let's hit validate. Why is it not? I don't know why it's not copying the. No, work on that later.
Yeah, the other one.
Illinois, like you said, Illinois, I stay far away from. Indiana, I would invest in. Kansas, you need to have, not Kansas. Kansas, I don't invest in, but Kentucky, you need to have basically $1 million net worth to buy notes in Kentucky. Louisiana, I don't invest in Louisiana. I know you do, Gail, but.
Yep.
Okay. Maryland. Is this the right tape? No, no wonder why. I have the wrong tape open.
Connecticut for notes.
Okay, yeah, I was looking at the CFD one you sent me. Okay, so that's why. Let me try this. Hold on. Yeah, okay. We were looking at the wrong tape real quick. Back to Arkansas, California, Colorado, Florida, look at, Hawaii, who knows, Massachusetts, stay away from. Minnesota, I don't know enough about. Mississippi's a good state. North Carolina's a decent state. Not in North Carolina. Wow. I gotta get in touch with Christine on those. New Jersey, no. New Mexico, I don't know. Like I said, I don't go out that way. New York. Let's see what questions we have from people. We offer interested into others. I'm in Arizona. I'm folks here like to invest in Arizona. Honestly, typically, Roy, I wouldn't even probably look at it to bid on it because I just don't know enough. And there's a lot of other investors that invest in Arizona. So that's something I'd probably, just not even take a look at or spend my time on. John mentioned, why don't I like Alabama? Alabama has a 12-month redemption period. So if you foreclose on a property in Alabama, you have to wait a year before you can really do anything with that property. Now you can try and do cash for keys or things like that. But, worst case is you have to wait a year. So that's a long time for Alabama. Is the St. Pete toxic because of the lien or something else? Is the lien from code or taxes?
Yeah, I don't remember. It was a municipal lien for something. And actually, I didn't even discover it. John Keith told me about it.
12K in city liens. So that's what it says.
Okay, so that is a lot less. But at the time, the price that they were demanding for it didn't, the numbers didn't work.
Roy, it is funny because I know like Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, those states typically are fast foreclosure states and so forth. And people, again, the East Coast, when you were up and down the East Coast, I don't go typically above the Mason-Dixon line, which is Pennsylvania up. I do invest in Pennsylvania, but very specific. Once you get above that, it's very rare because of just foreclosure timeframes and costs. And then as you start heading down, you got Virginia. Maryland is an extremely difficult state, but I have a lot of connections there. The Carolinas, aren't too bad. South Carolina, I think, for notes can have some foreclosure timeframes that are pretty lengthy. Florida is a lengthy state to foreclose in. You're probably going to be a year in foreclosure in Florida.
It's expensive too, isn't it?
Yeah.
In Florida?
Yeah, people.
I would just say about Pennsylvania, avoid Philadelphia like the plague. I live right here, but it is very borrower friendly. And
I've heard stories of after you foreclose on a property in Philadelphia, it taking up to a year for the sheriff to approve it or basically give you the deed.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I have a very good friend who is the investigative reporter at Philadelphia Inquirer. He just did this amazing series of articles about a guy who was stealing properties from, with the help of a corrupt notary, was stealing properties from people who were deceased, where the family didn't even realize anything was going on, and selling them to flippers in hot areas. So these houses have ended up being renovated. So I don't know why the investors, the flippers who bought them, didn't. I guess the paperwork did look legitimate because the deed, transferring it to the bad guy looked real and was accepted by the city. So yes, it's a weird combination of, when you're legitimate, trying to do legitimate things, it's really difficult. And yet, somebody was able to steal 10 houses from people just with the help of a crooked notary.
So just give me an idea, there is 88 Ohio assets and 73 Pennsylvania assets. So if you want to go
proceed with caution.
If you want to go through a challenging foreclosure where you might get somebody fighting with you, there's a third of this tape is there for you. And that doesn't include New York and New Jersey that are on here.
Well, some of these are definitely contracts for deed, though.
No, what was happening is I kept opening the old tape that you sent me. I was opening the wrong one.
Okay, so this is truly
This is truly the one with.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot in Texas. That's what surprised me is, there are a lot in Texas, which Texas is a very fast foreclosure state. So,
Yeah.
but again, I'll look at this, and granted, what I want to make sure is I don't get the shiny object syndrome. I would bet between the states I invest in, there's probably 150 assets on this list. So, do I want to look at the extra 75 in Texas? Probably not, because
Right.
there's plenty already in there.
So Sylvia, yes, you can pay borrowers to waive their redemption period, though some states don't allow them to. So you got to be careful. You got to check.
Let's see. Helena said, I'd be interested in St. Pete note if you're opening to working something out on that. David, do you let Metasource do all your recording, or do you do it yourself? So if that's for me, yes. If it's for Gail, she does it herself.
Yes, I use Simplifile, which you can do almost everything on there. Some counties don't participate.
But yeah, I use Metasource for everything. A lot of times, honestly, I just have the collateral sent directly to them before the hard files, before having them even sent to me, because they scan everything in anyways. And, and typically there's not really, much in those files compared to what I've gotten anyway. So, I'll have them sent to them and let them know they're on their way, and the moment they get them, to record them. So
what do they charge you to scan a whole file like that?
So for me, what they'll do is typically I have them do a soft collateral review. So they'll review the collateral for me that I have. And then they'll get the hard collateral review and scan everything. It's $40 and that includes a review title chain history and provide what's called an exceptions report, which is a report that says this is missing or that's missing. So that whole process is $40. If you use Richmond Monroe, they charge you like $50, but they charge you $100 for every exception. So if you're missing 3 assignments, they'll charge you $300. And that $300 fee is not to actually fix it. It's to put it on a piece of paper to know that it needs to get resolved.
Tell you.
Yeah, I learned the hard way. I have like 5 of them on my own, and I thought they were like, oh, they'll take care of them for me. And they're like, oh, no, we don't do that. We only just put them on the piece. And I'm like, so you're going to charge me $500, put this on a piece of paper, and then mark it off at some point in time? And they're like, yes. Yes, David, they hold all my collateral. It's a minimum of $10 a month for holding the collateral. So if you have one file, it's $10 a month, but I've got, 75 with them. So it's basically $1 per file, essentially.
So I can top that. I bought these 4 parcels at a commissioner's sale in Indiana, and now I have to notify the people who have any interest in those that, it's gone to the sale and they have only a short time to redeem it. And the attorney who does that wanted $750 per parcel. Some of them are just like vacant land, and he's writing to all the same people on all 4 of them. It's the same letter.
So a few people asked about Metasource, which is a company. It's also Orion is the division, and depending on if you have 1 or 1 or 10, if you only got one-offs here and there, Gail and I can give you a name of a woman by the name of Erica who can do one-offs for you as well. If like a Orion or Metasource, same company, they don't, they're like, you only have 1, I'm not going to do that for you type thing. We've got somebody else who handles all that as well that can do all those recordings. Somebody who actually used to do them all for Harbor Portfolio, who is kind of getting out of the CFD world for the time being, that can also handle this for you. Okay, interested. Good. Any other questions from people? Actually, I'm going to scroll down. Looks like a few.
Yes, we're already, it's 9:48.
Yeah. Yes, a $659 UPB. Do not buy that, people. and here's the reason why, honestly, is you're going to spend $300 in due diligence on it. you're going to spend $40 to board the loan, and then you're going to collect 2 payments over 2 months that you paid $30 to your service or whatever it is. You're going to spend $600 to buy a $600 asset. Yeah. Yeah. So what can you offer them? 20, $5 for it? I mean, if anything, it would be one that would be, okay, throw that in for free. Typically anything, and the thing that also people don't realize too is, say it was a $2,000 asset or $2,000 UPB that was paying $400 a month and had 5 payments left. And say you paid, 70% of that. So you paid $1,400 thinking, okay, I'm still going to make good money over a short time. So you're paying 70%. They make one payment down to $1,600. You're still paying 70%. So now you're paying $1,000 to get $1,600, but then the money you've put into it. So if they make a payment in between, your returns probably were cut in half. So be careful on some of these low balance ones, because you find out that the money you spend in them is, your upfront fees between collateral review and everything and stuff. I mean, I typically have at least, about $500 per file. So I would spend $500 for $650 UPB. Well, now let me go back for a second though. What's the total payoff? Total payoff is, let's see, 2,500, still not worth it. But if that total payoff was like 20,000, then I'd say, okay, I'll give you $500 or I'll give you $600 for it, in that instance. But most instances, it's not worth your time. Okay, good. I think from there, I think we've basically, been a little long today. So why don't we cut it for the evening? But I'd like to thank everyone for joining us again this evening. And again, we'll be on next Thursday. And Gail, any final thoughts?
No, I think everybody wants to get off and go pour over this this tape. It's massive, massive tape.
So 2 things I'll mention to people. If you're not part of the Facebook Notes and Bolts group, I recommend you go join it. Also, a lot of documents now that we're talking about, we're going to start putting on the Good Deeds Note Investing Podcast Facebook page, and eventually we'll roll them also onto the website. But, make sure you go like the Facebook page as well so you can have access to documents. And again, I did upload earlier today the enforceable lien language for notes, which will be very handy if you bid on these and get it awarded to try and negotiate and make sure you get
try to get them into the contract on these. Be very worthwhile.
I mean, I've never had a seller, basically say no to it, because I looked at them and said, hey, you're selling this asset, claiming it's a first, I'm paying for this based off of what you're telling me. So how do you get access to the Facebook pages? So John, if you are on Facebook, just go to Good Deeds Note Investing Podcast or in the search bar. And it's basically, that's just I think it's a business page. So if you click like and follow, you'll be able to see all the posts that we have on there. And there's a post from today that has that file to it. And then on the Notes and Bolts website.
Notes and Bolts is private, right? You have to join.
Private. So if you search Notes and Bolts, it will pop up, and you can just ask to join, and I'll make sure you're joined.
We will fast track you all.
Yes. So, okay. Well, thank you all for joining. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And by the way, if anyone has questions on some of these assets, I'm sorry, I keep talking.
Yeah.
If people have assets or interest of these and have questions like, ooh, maybe I should bid on this or interested in one, or let us know. We'll help you make sure your number is good. So that's the other thing that we'll work with you on is, hey, if you're interested in one and say, hey, should I bid 10,000 on this? We'll help you on that. So don't feel, afraid to ask or call us. We're more than happy to help you. So that's what we're here for. Okay. Well,
cool.
Okay.
Love you too, Helena. Mwah. Good night, everybody.
Good night.